So I believe you also started the Green Frame project. Is that correct? What is that?
Yeah, that's correct. So Green Frame started with the question that we had regarding the sustainability of the applications we built for our own customers. Are these applications emitting a lot of carbon? Are we going in the right direction? Because everyone is supposed to reduce their carbon emissions by 5% per year for the next 20 years. So are we doing that? How good are we rating on that level? So we started looking for tools that would allow us to assess the carbon emissions of our web apps. And the only ones we found were not based on scientific studies, were not based or they did have a scientific background, but with a too simplistic approach. And most of the tools that we found just assume that the carbon emissions of a website are proportional to the number of megabytes that the page downloads, which is super simplistic, and it doesn't take into account like the complexity of the JavaScript, the server-side rendering, or the network, or the type of animations that you have, the time you spent on the page, etc., etc. And so we're a software engineer company, and we thought, well, that shouldn't be so hard to build, right? That's our job. Classical engineer mistake. It was very hard.
That sounds pretty hard.
It was really hard, but we had to build it to realize how hard it was. So we partnered with a computer science researcher here in France who built this model based on many scientific papers around the world, and then we had to build all the engineering to collect a signal and feed it to the model, and then we had to make it into a cloud-based SaaS solution so that people could use it and we could use it as well. And there came GreenFrame. GreenFrame also has an open source core, so this model that we built and the collector that grabs the data and that runs user scenarios, all that is open source and everyone can try them. The idea is that we want to change our practices for a greener web, and we'd like everyone to do that as well, because if we are the only ones to build greener websites, the total carbon emissions won't change. So yeah, we're showing this tool as well. There is a commercial service that is called greenframe.io. It's the SaaS-based service using this open source solution, but hosted. And we hope that it will one day help us cover the expense that we put into developing this project, but we will need a lot of users for that.
Yeah, I'm really curious. So I've tried to go down this path a bit myself, and like even just trying to look at sort of the energy usage or the carbon emissions from running just the front end of a React application. I found it kind of overwhelming because I'm like, okay, first you'd have to figure out how much energy are we using by this approach versus this approach or whatever, right? But then where's that energy coming from? How can you know? Like somebody, viewing your web page on a mobile phone is going to have a totally different amount of carbon emissions than somebody doing it on a desktop computer in a different location, So how do you actually gather that data? Or is it more that's sort of a problem where you're like, we can't effectively do that, so we sort of take an average? Or I'm just curious, like I've tried to do this and I was just like, I don't really even know where to begin. Like this just seems like so many variables.
It is a complex problem. It is a complex problem because there are many variables, but it's even harder because computer scientists don't agree. There is no consensus on a model of the carbon emissions of a web application, or rather, there are too many. And whenever you pick one, you will always find a paper that contradicts the model that you've chosen. So that's really hard. And whenever you use a tool that tells you, okay, this page emits, I don't know, 1 gram of CO2 equivalent per visit, you can find another one that says it's 4 gram, another one that says it's 0.2 grams. And, the amplitude is quite large.
Yeah.
The solution we found is that we don't care about how many grams it actually emits, because what we want to do is to reduce the actual emissions. And you don't need to know the absolute. You don't need to know the absolute score. You just need to have a score that is proportional to the actual score. So if we say that we measured 1 gram, but in fact it's 10 grams, but then after a change, we see that it's 2 grams, while in reality it would be 20 grams. Well, we have the right information. We've doubled the emissions. And that's the signal that developers need when they instrument their code to make it greener. The idea is to make GreenFrame a tool that you put in your CI workflow, and that will tell you on each pull request, you have added, 10%, or you have removed 5% of the carbon emissions of your web app. And then as a manager, I don't give to my teams an objective in terms of carbon emission. I give them an objective in terms of carbon emission reduction. I say you have to decrease carbon emissions by 10% this month or this year. And we did that with the biggest French newspaper called Le Monde website, lemonde.fr. They hired us to reduce the carbon emissions of their homepage and after 2 months of work, we told them, okay, we've managed to reduce the carbon emissions of a visit to your homepage by 21%. And if you remove ads, it would be 70%. And they said 21% is all right. We'll take 21%. It's okay.